Compliance is often an approach through rules and detailed regulation. Natalie McManus takes a different view. She explains that starting with rules can lead organizations to miss the underlying issue. That distinction changes how leaders approach compliance, risk, and more broadly, decision-making. Welcome back. You're listening to RiskMasters, the download, where I share bite-sized insights from our latest interviews. This highlight comes from my conversation with Geary and Natalie McManus, where we explore one of the core ideas from their book, How to be a Chief Compliance Officer. We break down the difference between rule-based and principle-based compliance and why starting with harm leads to better decisions. Here is Natalie.
And I think actually this comes back to why you can't just follow the rules. You've got to think about the principles. The more things like this happen, the more people legislate to try and solve the problems when actually the principle is absolutely solid. And there's been a little bit of argument about whether something like the consumer duty under the FCA was necessary, because actually the principles of treating customers fairly were good, but they needed a greater push. They needed greater scrutiny. They needed a reminder in the industry that this duty to your customer should really be at the forefront of your mind. Why are you still getting it wrong? So you come back to this world of really you've got to pick customer first. And really you've got to stop and ask the first question, not what is the rule, but what is the potential harm? And if you start with what is the harm, chances are you'll figure out that there's an implicit rule that sits behind it. Now, that is not the case for certain jurisdictions. We know that the US is a lot trickier and a lot more, there's a lot less discretion in compliance regimes in the US. And if you breach a particular US filing rule on pensions, for example, there is a very specific fine you will get. And there's not a level of interpretation there. You've just got to do it. But where the risk attitude comes in is, well, how much time do you spend automating the systems and controls around that framework? Are you going to just rely on a calendar entry that says today's the day you need to get it in? Or are you going to have someone like me sitting on the shoulder of that person, watching to make sure they've done it within 24 hours? Because there's a cost to doing that. And so that's where the risk decision comes in, is how much do you trust your business to actually make these decisions and how much do they need supervising? Because if you put me on someone's shoulder, you will absolutely destroy the commercial value of the organization. Whereas if you teach someone to be their own critical voice in the air, then they will get much better outcomes and it won't have cost you as much.
And you probably have answered part of the question, but why do many organizations still struggle to extract value from compliance in that prospect? Because when I listen to the two of you, it seems quite obvious that getting it right for the customers or clients is good value proposition, right? So why are companies still not doing it?
I mean, let me have a go at that from a kind of an operations standpoint. I think what often happens is companies and people just get so exhausted and overwhelmed trying to comply with the breadth of regulation that there is out there. And, you know, we're now in a world where it's so complex and layered. If you're any kind of an international organization or any kind of a regulated organization, it's without some kind of reg tech solution, I think it's becoming pretty close to impossible to comply. And you know, I always talk about sort of strategic clarity and operational excellence. You don't get to have the clarity without the operational excellence. And so I think, you know, there is, and you know, Natalie is so comfortable with all this, you know, that it maybe doesn't come out, but I mean, like there is an awful lot of operational work that comes with with the compliance of the regulation. But the great news is that there's a wealth of solutions that are out there now that allow you to stay bang up to date, to map your controls to regulation when regulation changes, to have those particular controls flagged up and so on. So and I don't want to gloss over that and just say, well, that's table stakes and that's easy and that kind of thing. You know, like there is huge work to be done in mapping the regulatory landscape and getting the organization set up to comply with that. But I think what we're kind of saying is you have to go beyond that. Like if you want to be a great compliance leader and if you want to be strategic and involved and engaged, it's not just about, well, rule 1, 2, 3 says this and you've got to do it. It's got to be you've got to do that, and then you've got to kind of rise above that and take it to the next level.